All right, tonight the president's going to deliver an Oval Office address about what he describes as a humanitarian and national security crisis at the southern border. You'll likely hear three main points, but for fact's sake, let's see if they're true. The first claim, terrorists come across the southern border. The president and his aides continue to say that terrorists use the southern border to enter the country undetected. A briefing by the Homeland Security Secretary to senior lawmakers and released by the White House included this slide. Now, if you look at everything on this slide, it talks about the southern border, 17,000, 3,755, and 6,000. There's a line about known or suspected terrorists prevented from traveling to the U.S. or entering the U.S. No mention in this line of the 3,755 about the southern border. That's because nowhere near that number was stopped at our southern border. According to data provided to Congress last May and obtained by NBC News, only 6 foreigners whose names were on a list of known or suspected terrorists were stopped at the U.S.-Mexico border in the first half of the government fiscal year 2018. Compare that, interestingly enough, with 41 such people who were stopped at the northern border whose names were on the same list. As you know, there's no wall to Canada. That's nearly 7 times more stops at the northern border than the southern border due to the federal terror list. While any terrorist entering the United States is bad news, there are not thousands entering over the border. And then, of course, there's this claim.
You know, I've heard numbers as high as $275 billion we lose on illegal immigration.
Also simply not true. A study by the conservative think tank Heritage Foundation found that the cost was closer to $54 billion, but keep in mind, it's difficult to precisely calculate costs and benefits of undocumented immigrants because many do pay taxes into the system, even when using fake Social Security numbers. That's how they're allowed to work when they pay sales tax and property taxes through rent payments and other types of payments they make. So the president, I don't know where he gets his numbers from, but not even close to the truth. And then there's the entire premise of the president's address, that immigrants are overrunning the southern border. According to Department of Homeland Security data, more than 415,000 people were stopped at the southern border in the government's fiscal year 2017. But that very same fiscal year, the latest data available, more than 700,000 people who legally visited the United States overstayed their visas. This is a commonly known fact. The biggest issue we have with people in the country illegally is from people who legally get visas and overstay them. Canadians, by the way, made up the largest group of visa overstays. Canadians made up the largest group of visa overstays in the United States. Again, the United States government's own data, this is not secret stuff that we're digging up, shows that our southern border is not the primary source of unlawful immigrants into the United States. Now, Stephanie, none of this means that we should be having any terrorists at all, or immigrants or gang members coming into the United States. There is something to fix here. That's a fact. But why don't we just be honest about what needs to be fixed and then fix it?
This is the problem, Ali. Much needs to happen in terms of immigration reform.
Absolutely.
The issue actually, to me, is less about this specific problem and more about the fact that our White House, right, conservative news outlets are putting out straight misinformation propaganda right now. And I just think that all of those good Americans out there, those loyal viewers, deserve better. There's lots of people in this country who say, I obviously believe everything the president tells me. He's the president. And it's stunning to me, Ali, the 2 weeks leading up to the midterms, the president devoted much of his social media time to the caravan, to the threat that the caravan was going to bring to this country, all that it would do. Then the election happened, and we barely heard about him speak after. And by the way, that's when the caravan would have arrived after the election. So how could you possibly say that it's a humanitarian crisis? You clearly used it as a political ploy.
So if someone said 6 people whose names were on a terrorist list got through the southern border, I'd say, okay, we got to solve that. How do we get that to 0? But to say it's 3,755 and the president drops numbers like 17,000 and 60,000, it's 6. It's a lot more at the Canadian border, and maybe that's something we have to solve. I think it is something we have to solve.
But if we're suddenly wordsmithing special list, I mean, come on now. We're all rowing in the same direction. We want to be physically safe, socially free, financially secure, and let's help every American do that. Joining us now, our dear friend and superstar, NBC News national security and justice reporter, Julia Ainsley.
Because she's doing the reporting that tells us that
you are the reason we know that the number isn't 4,000, it's 6.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much to unpack here. This is a great conversation. This is one of the reasons why I love immigration, because at the end of the day, it actually comes down to facts or things you can hold on to prove what is happening and what's not happening in trends. And when we unpacked this, we were able to see that according to data they gave Congress, like Ali said, we're not digging this out of nowhere. The latest data they gave Congress, Customs and Border Protection, said that there were 6 non-Americans, non-U.S., non-residents they picked up at the southern border in the first half of 2018. We don't have the second half of 2018, but judging on those trends, it would be hard to see how you would go from one person every month to suddenly reach 4,000 by the end of the year. And another thing they found is that more people are entering from the northern border. As you point out, there were 41 immigrants from the northern border. So this totally undercuts a lot of what the president is going to try to lay out tonight when we talk about a crisis on the border. The other thing, Stephanie, when you talk about how it feels like a lot of wordsmithing. Last night, DHS put out a statement saying that the media was conflating terms. When in fact, it's actually the administration is conflating two things that are pretty different. One is a special interest alien, and then others are those who are on the watch list. First of all, neither group has been arrested or charged or convicted of terrorism-related charges. That is far above what we're talking about with these two groups. But being on a database means that there's enough intelligence that the United States has your name on a list. Being a special interest alien really just means that a Customs and Border Protection agent took another look at you because you didn't come from a country they expected. As we know, the majority of those crossing the border come from Central America. When they see somebody pop up from India, from Africa, from the Middle East, they want to check that person, rightly so, figure out how they got there, if they're using a correct passport, if they are who they say they are. They just go through a little bit more scrutiny. But that does not mean that they rise to the level of terrorist or even someone who would be on a database. They're far below that. And we're seeing the White House more and more just over the past 24 hours turn to that term, special interest alien, because it's a lower bar. And then they have higher numbers that accompany that lower bar.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.